Hello folks, thanks for having us. My name is Tadhg O'Leary. I grew up on a dairy farm in South Kerry, and that'll become relevant in a minute. And I work in a pharmacy which I took over in 2005. I've worked in since 1998, and I happen to work next door to Jar, who many of you here know. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened to us in Blackpool, what we went through, a little bit touch on that, and then something we did to try and help ourselves to deal with it. Okay, so just to give you a bit of a background here, there's the clicker. So this is the catchment. So you can see the city of Cork here. We're about a kilometre north of Patrick Street, maybe a kilometre and a half north of Patrick Street. The River Bride flows through the village. And here you can see on the right hand side here, so it's overground. It's overground pretty much all the way down, and it just goes underground here into an underground culvert system and flows on into the Lee. You can see the pharmacy there, and Jar's Centra is next door to me. Okay, so here's a little potted history of the flooding in Blackpool. I remember I started work full-time there in November 2002, and we were flooded twice that week. In 2000 and... Here we go. In 2004, 2005, we got a new culvert system. There was a substantial investment made in the village, and we got a new culvert system, and we thought all our problems were over. Unfortunately, they weren't. We were flooded again in January 2010. We were flooded pretty catastrophically in June 2012, and again in March 2013. Okay. One of our big issues in Blackpool, unfortunately, the river flows through an area known as Orchard Court locally. And we have serious difficulties with dumping, unfortunately, into the channel. And just where the channel goes underground, the debris builds up underground, clogs the channel. The capacity there is very limited anyway underground. Myself and Jar get into the river on a regular basis and remove the debris, and you can see here some photos during the summer. This is stuff we've taken out during the summer. Mattresses, bikes, nappies, radiators, you name it. We've been collecting these photos. Shopping trolleys are a particular problem because the combination of shopping trolleys and mattresses is a real big problem for us. We have currently, ahead of major storms, we have a kind of community rota, but usually the community rota is me and Jar, and we go in and we clean out the river because we pretty much have to. Okay, here is a thing that was causing a lot of issues for us, was a grid, as you can see, and this grid was extremely prone to blocking. Now, best practice is that these grids are 3 times the width of the river, so you put them at an angle so that they're not so subject to blockages. Here we can see an example of an ESB high tension service duct. So this is crossing the channel just, you can see there the entrance to the underground culvert system. So this is crossing it just maybe 100 meters downstream, and obviously a huge capacity problem there. I suppose after being flooded in 2013, when myself and Jar became frustrated at the lack of apparent progress, so we took it on ourselves to walk the underground culvert system. And we took a number of photos, and we brought those photos to a public meeting and got our local politicians and councillors engaged. And what we discovered underground was a huge amount of fridges, radiators, all sorts of metal debris blocking the channel underground. You can see here a key part of the channel. There was a couple of shopping trolleys here. A mattress got stuck in them. Various other debris got stuck in that. And that obviously, we needed that capacity badly in times of flooding. Okay, one of the particular problems we have here as the water flows down the channel is, this is a weak point on the bank here, and I'll show you some photos of that in a minute. But the water, this grid blocks, water floods out over the bank here on the right hand side. Unfortunately, the topography of the village then doesn't help us. It's pretty much like a bowl, and that bowl fills up in about 5 to 10 minutes. I remember in the 2013 event, the alarm went off in the shop, and 4 minutes later I got to the shop and the water was chest high. So it fills up very, very quickly. It'll be pretty much the same for parts of Great William O'Brien Street, Thomas Davis Street. Okay, we continue there. Okay, just looking at the rainfall, just to give an idea, this is data from Cork Airport. Cork Airport's about 8 kilometres away, and we're lucky that they have fairly comprehensive rainfall data. So we're able to use this. So I suppose one of the things that really worried us was there was a lot of rain, but if you look at the max hourly here, it wasn't huge in 2013. This made us extremely nervous because it's one thing if we have an epic 1 in 100 rainfall event, but if we're having modest events at night and we're getting flooded, it was a big problem for us. Okay, so here you can see this is the famous Orchard Court. Here's the low bank of the river. It's a photo from June 2012. Just to give you a perspective there on the shop, you can see the keys in the door there. That's the kind of height we get hit with. This is the entrance to the underground system here. Okay. Can see we threw out pretty much everything, computers, equipment, you name it, records in 2002, 12, 13. Here's Juris Centra next door, there's us next door. You can see the counter here upside down. It just gives a flavour of the damage it does. Unfortunately, these buildings as well were built in about the 1800s, so they're kind of, I suppose, mortar. They're very much mortar. They like the water seeps into the building walls, and it takes it months and months to get it out. So you have a substantial problem afterwards trying to dry out the buildings as well. So we didn't really know where to turn. It was a very stressful time for us because after the night flooding of 2013, we were having to kind of drive to the village late at night to check the culvert. It wasn't so much if there was a huge amount of rain. If there was a blockage and it blocked the grid, we were in trouble. If it got out over the bank, it would flood the whole village. Not just the same story for us. All the residents in the village were in the same scenario. It has the oldest population, which is interesting, of any electoral ward of the city. It's a very elderly population, tons of Coronation Street style houses, ground floor. They were very worried. I was hearing a lot about it in the pharmacy day to day, allied with driving in and out, talking to Jar. We were taking turns to drive in at night and check the culvert for rubbish, because if we got a large piece of debris like we got in 2013, I think we got a tractor tire, blocked the grid, water spills out. So we're straight in the firing line. Okay, I might just skip this, but I might show it to you later. Okay, so we covered some of this here. One interesting factor was, speaking of personal protective equipment, a lot of the local residents were issued with personal protective equipment in 2012, and these were cast iron flood barriers. The problem really was they couldn't lift them. And you can see here is an example of a lady that lives across the road from me. So she was relying on family to come in and put this up for her at the very mention of rain. So if Gerard Fleming mentioned rain, her family were being summoned in to kind of put this up. Obviously, the other problem is once it's up, God forbid anything goes wrong, she can't get out. I was hearing very much about this in the pharmacy. Okay, so we decided we needed to do something about it. We did a bit of research, and commercial flood warning systems, there was a number of them available in the UK. They were about $5,000, a bit of a stretch to fund one. So what to do? Also, it wasn't so much the $5,000. It was like if anything went wrong with that flood system, they'd have to come over from the UK, try and fix it up. So we foresaw a lot of problems there. So we decided, okay, so that was the scenario on the ground. Our kind of design criteria were, I suppose when I grew up on a dairy farm, we had RT1, RT2, and we had basically CCTV in the calving shed. So this is where the idea came from. We needed to be able to monitor the river at home, but it didn't just need to be passive. Like it didn't need us to go and check it at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning. We needed something that would text out or warn the older people if there was a problem. They weren't too happy interacting with screens or laptops, so it needed to be a text system for them. Okay, so these all fed into what we would try and design. Okay, so we decided, after a lot of research, we found out that the kayakers had a system that we felt we could adapt. basically, I'll show you some pictures of this in a minute. Basically, we installed a water level sensor, and it was a sensor, steel scaffolding pipe, a steel box. It pretty much had to be vandal proof because we had some issues in the area. Jura had his window broken a few times, unfortunately. So the idea was that you could literally drop a concrete block on this and it would come through it. And we used an old Nokia phone, and that texted out the data to a website where it was filtered, and we could set preset levels, and if it exceeded an absolute level or changed levels too quickly, it would send you a text, or you could also ring it. So we got great technical help, and I suppose this is really what I'm driving at. You will, if you start a little project locally, you will get fabulous help from the woodwork, help you wouldn't expect at all. The parts cost about €1,000. We spent a lot of time on it. I'll show you here. Okay, so here we go. This is the actual. So here's our grid. So we went with a traffic light system, green, orange, red. Okay. Steel scaffolding pipe, level sensor. There's your steel box. We deliberately went for a difficult to access site to cut down on any potential vandalism. This actually is, we updated it this year after running it for maybe 2 years, 2.5 years. We ran it for 2.5 years. We added a solar panel because we didn't want to take that risk in the start. We learned a huge amount along the way. We had to learn to deal with all these things called memory leaks, shutting down in cold weather, all sorts of issues like that. We kind of battled our way through. Here's a screen grab, and you can all have a look at it online if you wish. It's River Spy Blackpool. So here you have the text system. So we can set all this, and basically we'll text out, and all the GP surgeries, the businesses. I had a sign-up sheet up in the pharmacy. You came in, you gave your mobile number, and it would text you. So we have a good few people on the texting system. This is the web interface, and you can see some historic data here. And we have our little system there. So you can see all that. Interestingly, this year we became aware of an OPW gauge further up the river. And we were able to, they kindly provided us with their data, and we were able to pull out our data, and we were able to benchmark the two of them just to kind of validate that we were doing things, that our data was pretty correct. And we took a flood event here, well, not a flood event, let's say a high rainfall event in 2015. And you can see we got a good correlation there. The spikes are in the same point. Obviously, it's going to be offset because they're further up the river. Okay. So I suppose what we learned over time was, if you start a local group, be it Community River Watch, Community Cleaning the River, engage with your OPW, engage with the local politicians, local councils. You will, if you start something along the idea of a tidy town where it's voluntary, you will be surprised. It's like the story of the soup and the stone we all learned in school. You'll get all sorts of technical help and various bits and pieces from unexpected sources. For us, I think myself and Jar was very much about a sense of kind of dread every time there was rainfall, and for the locals, especially after the second flood in 2013, which was only 9 months after the first one, literally the people drying out the building had left the week that we were flooded again. And there was a fabulous sense of kind of at least controlling what we could control for us and doing something to help ourselves. And there's a great benefit in that, kind of almost psychologically, because it's a real emotional event seeing the place destroyed a number of times. Going forward for us, our local scheme, we're hoping it'll start. We're hoping it'll start in December, please God, or maybe early next year. We hope to get a rainfall gauge, and Mark Adamson made reference earlier to more detailed forecasts from Met Éireann. So we're hoping to. We met with them actually during the summer, and we're hoping to use their more detailed rain forecast to build a little flood curve from the river if we can get hold of a rain gauge. And then that would mean that if Met Éireann say, okay lads, you're going to have 30 mil of rainfall, we know what's going to happen in the river and we can prepare accordingly. And finally, I suppose we are working hard to try and manage our dumping in the area because of the risk of the underground culvert until the new scheme starts. Okay, thanks very much.